Hey everybody, Professor Malat here. Welcome to week 6. I am using my headset today as I record to hopefully block out any of the sound that might be occurring in the background of my household. Um, I had a busy week, so I didn't really have time to record when people were not in the house. So I'm trying to take advantage of a somewhat quiet period this morning to get this video completed for you. So this week we are heading into working on the rough draft for the genre analysis, and I have a bunch of materials available for you to hopefully help you complete that assignment and at least wrap your head around it and get a good start on the draft. Um, but there are a few things that I want to go over. So I'm going to share my screen here. There are some definitions that we've kind of been dealing with over the past couple of weeks as we have started this genre unit. Um, so to recap what we were talking about or what we were discussing over the last couple of weeks is we're kind of expanding your definition and your understanding of what genre is. Typically, you have thought of genre very much in literary terms, right? You've gone through many years of schooling and you've been exposed to literature. And so you're familiar with the various literary genres. If you think outside that box a little bit, um, you have movie genres, and movie genres kind of parallel the literary genres. And then further outside that box, you have musical genres, right? And so, as you can see here on the screen, the term genre comes from the French word kind or type. And in rhetoric studies or English studies, it relates to categories of text, right? So we've talked about the literary genres, we've talked about film genres. There's also musical genres, right? Um, Genres here meet the needs of the rhetorical situations, and this is where we're kind of expanding the definition and our understanding of genre. So if you read Amy Devitt, she challenges you to kind of expand the definition of genre and why we have them, right? They exist because they meet the needs of particular rhetorical situations in which they function. So here is where we start to expand it. And they say here, for example, wedding invitations or newspaper advice columns. And they evolve and they change over time with the activities which they support. At their broadest, genres can be understood as quote shared expectations among some groups of people, end quote. Um, so we have that newer definition of genre. It's not just literary, it's not just film, it's not just um, musical, right? It is part of the everyday writing that makes communication easier, right? It facilitates communication between group members. And this is important for us to understand in this class because our final unit is the discourse community unit. And you have heard me in previous talks and things that we've read previously, videos that you've watched. Last week you had kind of an introduction to Professor John Swales, who really has this whole big thing about discourse communities. Um, and so in week 6, I think, or week 7, we'll start to dip our toes into those waters. So genre is kind of this, and understanding genre and doing genre analysis is kind of a building block to the final unit and to the final discourse communities project. So it's very important that you grasp this new understanding of genre and can apply it in the genre analysis assignment. We also have this thing called genre systems, which are sets of genres that function together to accomplish some activity. So, and I think the example I gave last week was, they're in college classes, you have certain documents that help to facilitate communication and help to facilitate the understanding of the group members. That could be the syllabus, assignment guides, feedback, exams, essays, that kind of thing, to create a genre system. And those exist because it's a series of different genres interrelated and they depend on each other to have their full use and meaning. And then there is also this word heuristic. So for the genre samples assignment, I also gave you a genre analysis heuristics handout, and that's just a fancy word for how to problem solve, right? And usually it is a systematic approach or pattern of steps to follow in order to solve a problem. So, for example, here in this definition, a heuristic for deciding what to have for dinner might be the following: check the fridge, check the pantry, and then eat whatever can be assembled most quickly and palatably from the ingredients there. Um, in our class, it's usually a series of questions to help you think through the various aspects of a genre analysis. So that genre analysis is not only helpful in your assignment for the genre samples, but it will also be helpful for the assignment of the genre analysis rough draft. So let's get to that assignment. I'm going to close this document and um, share our Canvas page. We will go into week 6 here so we can take a look at the various materials that I have available for you. So, of course, in the checklist, we have the rough draft, which is due Sunday, the 22nd. I have a PDF of the project handout, which is just the same thing that you have here at the rough draft. So we'll look at the rough draft. I also have a Canvas page on genre analysis, drafting, and organizing tips. I know that some of you might be a little bit anxious. You've never done a genre analysis before, but I'm here to tell you not to worry about it. It's essentially part rhetorical analysis and part compare and contrast. So it's just called something different. But it will be familiar to you once you take a look at the assignment and understand what's expected of you. There's also a handout of questions for genre analysis, and this comes from Purdue OWL. So this might also be helpful in addition to last week's heuristic that I provided for you in week 5. So let's take a look at the rough draft. Oh, and of course, lastly, we have a student example from my previous English 2089 class called Helping is the End Game. So you can see how a student has actually written their genre analysis. So let's take a look at the assignment here. Again, you've already done your genre samples. That was due last week, June 15th. This week we are dealing with the rough draft. We do have a peer review, and keep in mind I'm not giving you a whole week for the peer review. We have a very quick turnaround because I really want to spend the bulk of our time on the discourse communities unit. So our peer review will be Wednesday, June 25th. So it is vital. I cannot stress this enough. It is vital that you get at least 50% of your draft completed. I know that some of you do not like to write rough drafts. I get it. I'm one of those people. I would much rather have a fully polished draft that I don't make any changes to and resubmit again. So I get it. I work differently than a lot of people, and I understand it, but still I need to have something that I can provide feedback to you for. So I encourage you to try your best to get at least halfway through the rough draft, if not all the way through the rough draft. The final revision will be due at the end of the month, June 29th, and the length is about 1,200 to 1,500 words, and that works out to be about 5 to 6 pages that are double spaced, 12-point font, yada, yada, yada. Of course, at this level, you're intermediate comp students, so I expect you to understand how to use correct in-text citations and how to have a separate works cited or references page, bibliography, what have you. Of course, that's not included in the page count. So 5 to 6 pages of your own analysis, and then separate for your references, right? So the purpose of this assignment is to analyze 2 texts from 2 different genres. So it's very important that you have 2 different genres to understand the rhetorical strategy. So, again, if you remember your rhetorical analysis that you've done in Comp 1, hopefully you've done it. If you haven't, if you took Comp 1 at a different school other than UC, um, chances are you may have not done a rhetorical analysis, but it's expected that you know how to do this. So the analysis will explore the rhetorical strategies, purposes, and audience expectations. It will also help you develop a deeper understanding of how genres function and how you can effectively write within them. So it aligns with the course objective of understanding and applying genre conventions in your writing. Um, of course, the skills that you gain doing this assignment, you have understanding, analyzing, synthesizing, and creating. You can read more about that. And then, of course, you gain the knowledge of certain content knowledge in this discipline, the discipline of English studies, the conventions and purposes of different genres, and theories and concepts related to genre and rhetorical analysis. So, the first task, select two texts that you did for your genre samples. Um, so ensure that the genres are distinct. So, for example, letter and congressional testimony, a speech and a poem, a blog and a scientific article, right? Two different types of genres. They should be related, but just different genres. Research the genres, gather information about the conventions, the purposes, the audio expectations of each particular genre. Like, for example, a blog functions very differently. It typically has a different type of audience than a scientific paper, right? A paper that's published in a scientific journal. So you want to think about the different types of conventions that are used. Conventions just means how it's written, right? Are there certain standards that the writer must adhere to? Um, Certain types of language that's used, so on and so forth. Then you analyze the text. So this is kind of like the rhetorical analysis. So you're going to examine the rhetorical strategies, purposes, and audience of each text. Consider how the genre affects these elements, and you're also going to compare and contrast, right? So you compare and or contrast the rhetorical strategies, you compare and contrast the genre conventions of these two texts. You hopefully will integrate some of the things that you've been reading, right? Incorporate some of the ideas. So if you want to reference John Swales, there was a video a couple weeks back on that Professor John Swales gave about genre. Reference that video. And if you need help referencing something that isn't a print text, you can either Google that or you can ask me and I'll help you with it. Amy Devitt, that would be another one, right? So if you want to use Devitt's example, or if you want to reference my AI generated podcast from a lecture that I had given a couple of years ago, you're more than welcome to reference that as well, and we'll figure out how to do those references. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with Citation Machine. Citation Machine is really helpful and usually takes much of the brain work out of figuring out how to do your citations. So I want you to try to incorporate ideas and concepts from the readings, from the videos, from any audio stuff that I may have presented to you over the past few weeks to frame and explain your analysis. And of course, you're going to write and edit the thing, ensure that your analysis is clear, organized, interesting, so on and so forth. So the criteria for success is to clearly define those genres and their conventions, discuss the rhetorical purposes, the audiences of each genre, provide a detailed and thoughtful analysis of rhetorical strategies and genre conventions of each text, compare and contrast the strategies and genre conventions, incorporate ideas and concepts from the readings, be clear, organized, interesting, cited, so on and so forth, and follow the attached grading rubric. There is a rubric down below, and it's also included on the PDF handout of the assignment. So I'm looking at the content. I want you to be able to define genres and provide deep insights into the conventions, purposes, and audience expectations. Of course, I expect it to be organized clearly, logically, well organized. The analysis should be detailed and thoughtful for both rhetorical strategies and genre conventions. I want to see some comparison or contrast of the two texts, some integration of the readings, and of course, a clear, engaging, and well edited writing quality. Um, so, even though it's worth a meager 10 points, it's vital that you get this rough draft done, because if you miss out on that, then you can't do a peer review. Peer review, of course, hinges on you completing and submitting a draft. Um, so, if you don't submit a rough draft and take part in peer review, it's going to result in about 5% deduction of your final genre analysis project. So it's important that you get it done, and you get it done on time, because we have kind of a compressed time framework. Um, so let's go back to the module here and take a look at the supplementary materials so you can see what I have provided for you. So again, we have the genre analysis PDF. It's just the same thing that I have there, with the grading rubric attached at the end. So nothing different there. The Canvas page for analysis, drafting, and organizing tips. So some suggestions could include starting out with a Venn diagram, right? Venn diagram are the circles that kind of overlap a little bit and have some similarities and have some differences. So that might help you graphically with brainstorming. Then, of course, you want to think about your introduction and thesis. So when you begin to write your comparison, you need to identify your genres, right? And state the basis on which you are comparing them, and indicate whether you plan to emphasize their similarities or their differences. So, again, looking at the student example is really helpful to see how one student decided to organize their writing. You don't have to organize it the same way if that doesn't make sense to you, but it is at least one example of how you can organize the essay. Of course, this is a thesis driven essay, so you want to make sure that your thesis is, it lets your reader know that it's what the topic is or what your argument is for the essay. And it depends on how the two things you are comparing relate to one another. I've provided a little template there that could be helpful, could not. And then for your body paragraphs, there are a few ways, or several ways, that you can go about organizing. So you could organize all aspects, or analyze all aspects of genre one, then move over to genre two, and then finish with an explanation of their similarities or differences. That does not mean one paragraph for genre one and one paragraph for genre two, and then a final paragraph. It's not going to be a 3-paragraph essay. It's 5 to 6 pages, so you're going to have multiple paragraphs, right? Hopefully that should be obvious to you, but I like to sometimes state the obvious. You could if that doesn't appeal to you, you could switch between genre one and genre two. Focus first on rhetorical analysis of both, then focus on the genre analysis of both, and then finish with an explanation of their similarities or differences. You could choose several similarities or differences to discuss and weave in the rhetorical purposes, weave in audience, and that kind of thing. The key idea here is to remember to have one main idea per paragraph and avoid lumping in too much information. A lot of you brought up in the discussion board, you talked about how in high school you were expected to write 5-paragraph essays, and I am one who wants to kind of blow that formulaic writing out of the water. I don't want you to do it, right? There are reasons you should write a 5-paragraph essay, but certainly not for a 5 to 6 page paper, right? Because if we have a page long paragraph and you're trying to stick everything into that 5 paragraph format, it's going to be a poorly written essay when it gets to be a longer type of essay, a longer paper. So I really don't want you to think too much about that 5 paragraph essay format. It is not something I want you to adhere to in this class simply because we are writing much longer papers. Um, so one idea per paragraph. Don't lump everything in together just to try to make it fit into that 5 paragraph framework because it's going to be a badly written paper. Um, we have a possible outline here, and you can read through that. So that's the Canvas page. Then we have this PDF questions for genre analysis. So as I said before, this is similar to the heuristic that I provided for you back in week 5. Um, but different questions. So I encourage you to read through this. Maybe this will be helpful as well, right? So we have kind of questions for the rhetorical analysis. You want to look at the structure, the audience, the purpose. Um, you want to look at support, right? How are the claims stated and supported in the genres that you are analyzing? Not how you are supporting it, but how do the genres support their claims? Do they support their claims? Depending on the genre, there may not be much need for support, right? And then, of course, you can also look at sentence level. How does the writer or the creator of the document, um, or whatever it can be, it doesn't have to be a document. It doesn't have to be text necessarily, right? It could be a video or a speech or something else. How how do they use language? What conventions do they use? That kind of thing. And are they going outside the norms of that particular genre, right? Are they being kind of out there? And is there a purpose for that? So there are a variety of questions that you can think about and ponder as you approach your draft. And again, we also have that student example that I talked about. I really enjoyed this paper. I think the student did a really good job. They were already working in this field, um, so they had a lot to say, and they wrote about 6 pages. And as you can see, we have a separate page here at the end. Um, I think in one of it may have been in the Canvas page, there is a suggestion that if you want to, you could also include an appendix at the end where you share the genres that you have analyzed. That's not a requirement, that's just a suggestion. However, as the student did here, they did cite the 2 documents that they were analyzing. Gosh, what's with me? So I think it was this one here, right? This was one of uh, their documents, and this was another one. So make sure that you cite the 2 things, the 2 genres that you are analyzing, or the 2 samples that you are analyzing, and everything will be golden. So if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm not traveling anymore. I am bouncing around to baseball games, usually starting on Thursdays, but that's pretty local. So I'm available via text. I'm available via email. Don't call me, just because I tend to not pick up the phone. But I'm happy to answer a text or an email, and I usually am pretty good about answering those quickly if I'm not traveling. So, as I said, my travel is pretty much over for the summer. Um, so I'm here to work with you, and if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask. Have a great week, everybody, and I'm looking forward to seeing your genre analysis. Bye bye.